You'll hear people say that once you hit 2 million in retirement savings, everything changes. That's the point where everything kind of gets easier, you don't have to worry as much, and the plan just kind of works out. In some ways that's true. You have more flexibility, more room for error, and more ability to recover if things go wrong. But in the ways that actually matter day to day, I found that not much changes at all. And in fact, for a lot of people, things become more complicated at that level. Because the problem is no longer just building money, it becomes figuring out how to actually use it without constantly second guessing yourself. More money removes pressure, it doesn't automatically create the clarity you need. Let's start with what really does change. So if you have, for example, $2 million saved, the math is very different. Using the 4% framework, that's about $80,000 per year before taxes. Add in Social Security, a couple could realistically be making $120,000 to $150,000 in total annual income depending on the timing. That's a very different retirement from somebody trying to live on $40,000 to $50,000 a year. It means you can absorb a bad market year without panic, you have more flexibility to choose when you want to retire, and you have more room to adjust spending. But here's where people get tripped up. Having more money doesn't tell you what to do, it just creates more decisions for you to make. And if you're anything like my fiance during wedding planning, more decisions equals bad. This is the part that most people don't expect. Even with 2 million, people will still hesitate on spending decisions. People still feel the difference between earning money and pulling money out of an account, and people will still think, what if the market drops right after I do this? There's research showing a large percentage of millionaires don't even feel wealthy. And that shows up in small ways, not in huge major decisions, but in everyday moments. When you're standing in your kitchen debating whether or not you should spend $6,000 on a family trip, or holding off on replacing a car when you could easily afford to do so. Delaying things that you've talked about for years because it still feels like a maybe later kind of situation. Bottom line is, the number changed, but the behavior didn't. Unfortunately, some people's habits don't retire when they do. Let me make this real. You retire at age 62 with $2 million. The house is paid off, and between you and your spouse, you can expect $5,000 to $6,000 in Social Security once you turn it on. For now, you're pulling about $6,500 a month from your portfolio to cover expenses. Everything feels fine, and then in 1 year, 3 things happen. Your HVAC system goes out, that's a $12,000 repair. You help your daughter out with a down payment on a home, so that's $25,000. And then you finally take that family trip that you've been planning for $9,000. That's $46,000 in 1 year on top of your normal withdrawals. Nothing about those decisions are irresponsible, mind you. In fact, they're pretty normal for somebody in retirement. But now your normal withdrawals aren't $80,000, they're closer to $120,000. And suddenly you're thinking to yourself, wait, are we okay? That's the moment people feel. Not, I ran out of money, but this feels a lot tighter than I expected. That's what 2 million actually looks like in real life. It's never a straight line, it's uneven. It's not the plan that stresses people out, it's when real life happens and it doesn't follow the plan. Now, flip that the other way. There are a lot of retirees that have 2 million that will never spend it. They live off their Social Security income and maybe pull a little bit extra from time to time, but ultimately they just let it sit. Research shows that many retirees, especially those at the higher asset levels, often spend less than what they could afford. You'll see people cancel trips they could easily go on, avoid helping family members when they want to, and constantly check their balances without ever feeling comfortable using them. So instead of running out of money, they have the opposite problem. They never really use it. I mean, some retirees, they protect their money so well, they never actually benefit from their own retirement savings. Which brings us to our next part. At 2 million, taxes start to show up in ways that most people don't expect. If most of your money is in pre-tax accounts, then every dollar you pull out counts as taxable income. So that $120,000 that we just talked about, that's not just spending, that's taxable income. Then, at age 73, required minimum distributions show up, and you no longer have the decision of how much comes out. The IRS has a full decision and tells you what you need to take out. And here's something that most people don't really like to think about, which is when one spouse passes, the other spouse will probably start filing as single, which means they're paying more taxes on the same income. So now the problem isn't, do I have enough money? It's, how do I control how this money comes out? One more thing that becomes very real at this level is that retirement doesn't stay consistent. Spending is usually higher early on in retirement because, you're traveling, you're helping out family, you're spending time with family, and you're finally doing the things that you wanted to do around the house that you couldn't while you were working. Then it slows down, and then healthcare costs increase. Yay! So the idea that you can just set one plan and forget it doesn't really match reality, right? This is no longer, hey, I'm 22 years old, just starting off in the workforce, I can set and forget my retirement plan. No. You can't do that now. Your plan has to adapt. Retirement is not just one long year, it's a series of different ones. If you were to take this up another level, say to 3 million or 4 million, the problem actually shifts again. Now it's less about whether you'll be okay, but what is this money actually going to be used for? You start seeing questions like, should I be doing Roth conversions? How do I minimize taxes long term? What happens to this money if I were to pass away? And should I be giving money away while I'm alive? And interestingly enough, this is where some people are even more hesitant to spend. Because now that the number is bigger, the fear of messing it up is bigger too. Just remember, the bigger the portfolio, the more intentional you have to be. So when people say everything changes at 2 million, they're not completely wrong, but what actually changes is not just the math. It's the type of decisions you're making. You're going from saving to spending, growing to coordinating, and building to managing. And without a plan, that shift can feel just as uncertain as everything leading up to it. The number, whether it be 2 million, 3 million, or 4 million, that gives you options. The plan tells you how to use them. Thank you for coming to today's episode of Tommy 2 Cents. I hope you were able to learn a few things. And as a reminder, if you want to grab some time with me to walk me through your current situation, there's going to be a link in the description below. I'm happy to help however I can. I'll see you in the next episode. Take it easy.